All right. Good morning, everyone. As Josette said, my name is Pakoki Obeng. I go by the author name PB Obeng. And first of all, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to attend this virtual author fair. It really means a lot to a lot of us authors here in the Hampton Roads area. So I just want to send out my appreciation to everybody who's participating, and again for Slover Library for actually putting this on. I know it's been kind of challenging with COVID, but you guys were able to pull things through. So I appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of the authors appreciate it. Again, as I mentioned before, my name is Pakoki Obeng. Grew up in Ohio, but I moved to Hampton Roads in 2013. Really trained as a physician, so writing is not my employment. Like I'm sure a lot of writers, they do other things, they work other jobs. So I'm actually trained as an internal medicine physician. I've worked in the area since about 2013. And then Vigil was my first book published. I've been writing it for some time. The concept actually started when I was younger, around the time of middle school, high school. I actually been thinking about these characters and kind of finally put pen to paper around 2002, but didn't really publish anything till around 2019. So it was a long stretch. So definitely long time in coming, but thankfully I was able to get it published. All right. So my question to you is, what do you get when you cross the Avengers and Tom Clancy? You get Vigil. Everyone has an agenda. So um, this is my debut novel. Again, it's a sci-fi political thriller with emphasis not just on the sci-fi aspect, but the human aspect as well. And so as we go along this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of my inspirations for the book, as well as give you a little bit of background on the characters and some of the main plot points as well. Alrighty. So, question: why do we need Vigil? That was something that kind of came to mind when I was writing the characters. You know, you have things that you like. I am still a big comic fan. Also, big fan of political thrillers. Um, I'm a big newsie too. I like listening to NPR and different news outlets and stuff. So I kind of wanted to combine those different aspects as well. But I saw in the market, at least from my perspective, that there was a dearth of political thrillers with characters of color. I love my Jack Ryans, I love my James Reeses, I love my Mitch Rapps, but I didn't really see anybody in terms of a main character, group of main characters that were people of color that kind of reflected my reality as well. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of comics. So, of course, I'm a big fan of things like, obviously, we mentioned the Avengers in the previous slide, as well as things like the X-Men and things like that. But one thing I noticed, at least when I first started reading those titles, was that I didn't really see too many characters of color on the same team. Might have one here, one there, but it wasn't a big mix. So I wanted to add that in there, kind of add that diversity in there, as well as the political thriller aspect and the of course the superhuman aspect too, which is the fun part. And then last point. Um, One of the things that this novel does, it blends genres that people love. Obviously, people are big into superheroes now, but not only that, love thrillers. We've seen things like, of course, the Bourne series, Robert Ludlum's Bourne series. We love a lot of action like Mission Impossible, and of course aspects of drama in there too. So it mixes all those things to make it into a nice combination. So, and as you see there, this art display is actually courtesy of my concept artist Eric Leon. Did a great job. But these are all the characters, and I'm going to actually break them down a little bit too, as well. Alrighty. All right. So I talked a little bit about my background, talked a little bit about why I saw the need for the book, what some of my inspirations were. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of my inspirations. So as you can see in the slide here, um, definitely, again, my love of comics and thrillers. I'm a big fan of strong female characters. I.e. Storm from X-Men was definitely one of the inspirations for one of my main characters, Alicia Conrad. Um, there was a writer, actually a number of writers, but one in particular I was a big fan of, Chris Claremont, from back in the 70s. Actually, he wrote in the 70s, 80s, and part of the 90s of the X-Men series. And he actually had a lot of strong female characters. And that kind of influenced me growing up as I read comics to have those kind of characters at the forefront, which I thought would be cool and interesting. Along with that, I'm a big fan of reading Clancy novels. I haven't read all of them, but Dragon and the Bear is definitely one of my favorite ones too. It's pretty lengthy, but I definitely enjoyed reading it. Of course, the complex characters. He has a lot of um, tech. Well, not tech, but a lot of specificity, I should say, when it comes to military aspect, when it comes to political aspect. And that's one thing I wanted to include in the novel is kind of include that technical aspect as well. And I'm still learning on how to do that better. And that's one of those things that comes along with being a writer. Just learning your craft, getting better, trying to grow as a writer. And then last, of course, shows like Alias, as you see at the top of the slide there, Jennifer Garner in her trademark red wig and her parents. I forget the actors' names, but definitely Alias, 24 with Jack Bauer. Those were definitely influences as well, especially Alias. As you read the novel, you'll see some of those influences in terms of the double crosses and in terms of um, the surprises. So definitely, those are all kind of part and parcel of the influences that inspired my writing when I wrote Vigil. All right, so what's it about? So essentially, I broke it down to three things: it's about power, responsibility, and family. Even though it is a big political thriller, it has a superhuman aspects. It boils down to, if you had all this power, what would you do with it? Are you going to abuse it? Are you going to use it for the betterment of yourself or for your fellow human being? And it tackles, the issues of responsibility. Okay, I pretty much have all this ultimate power. I could do so much damage or so much benefit to others. So it's one of the things I definitely wanted to bring up and to actually explore as well, not only with the characters but also us as individuals, and also in terms of our government and in terms of those we place in power, the responsibility that they have. And then lastly, it's about family. The main uh, focus, I would say, in terms of emotional focus, emotional core of the book is Alicia Conrad. She's a team leader. Um, and she is basically the emotional foundation. We explore her family background, which is very interesting as well. I do include her siblings in there too, and that's something that I enjoy too, is a family aspect as well. And then also too, within the greater storyline, of course, I'm going to take you through the characters coming together, learning their purpose, because of course they're supposed to be America's super team. That's essentially what they are, pulled from various government agencies to basically help defend the country from superhuman threats. But as they go along, they learn more about the real reason why they were put together. All right, so let's meet the characters. So first one is, like I mentioned before, Alicia Conrad. She's a U.S. Army captain. Has been in the Army for about 10 years. Her father was a high-ranking military official, and that plays a big role too in terms of her history. Unfortunately, he was killed in a car accident, and she has to deal with that reality. It's been years since her parents' death, but there's always been some mystery as to how her parents died. It wasn't, of course, it was her mom and her dad. She's a team leader. She has special abilities as well, but as you read the novel, you'll learn how she got those special abilities, which I think will be a fun discovering for the readers as well. And as I mentioned before, she's the emotional center and focus of the book as well. And as you read along, you'll see why. All right, and then the next character is Aaron Blankenship. He and Conrad have a history. So these two worked in the special forces, but he's more the tech guy. He knows all the gadgets. He has his own exoskeletal armor, which is patterned after the Department of Advanced Research Projects Agency's program, special program. And because of their history, because of Conrad and Blankenship's history, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of banter between the two, because even though he gives her a hard time, he truly does love her and he has her best interest in mind. But again, he's a little bit older too, um, as well, so he also brings that aspect. And sometimes he clashes with some of the younger members of the team. And Cynthia Feinbull. So Cynthia is actually the youngest character. She is a CIA agent, special ops, of course. Has the ability to shapeshift. So obviously, she can take on any humanoid form. It doesn't matter if it's a man, woman, It has to be someone relatively in the adult field. She can't morph into someone like a baby or something like that, or an inanimate object. But she's definitely the character that goes in there on covert operations. She can take on any disguise because obviously her body shapeshifts to that. And then also too, she's very skilled in hand-to-hand combat. She's sort of a cavalier when it comes to being in the field. Sometimes she doesn't listen to orders because she just wants to get the job done. Sometimes that gets her in trouble, as you'll read. All right, next one is Terrell. Terrell Morrison. He is a Secret Service agent in a non-uniform division. He's the chief security officer, so he has a little bit of background. Obviously, he's defended the president. He's been firsthand, and there's actually a scene in the early part of the book where there is an attack on the White House, and he's actually the guy there. But he has a special ability to alter his molecular density. Not only that, but eventually his powers will expand as well, and I actually will touch on that as the series progresses. But he's a moral center. I call him the moral center of the team when it comes to issues of maybe crossing certain moral lines in terms of getting their job done. He's the one that raises the alarm. He's the one that brings people to focus to say, "Hey, this isn't right." And he's kind of like the check on potentially the team themselves, kind of going off on the deep end when it comes to things that might be unethical or might not be necessarily right, just so they can accomplish their goals. Because to him, the ends don't justify the means. You have to do things the proper way, and that's one thing that Terrell is kind of there for, to kind of remind the team of that. Okay, and then John Arrowhawk, definitely one of my favorite characters too. He's an FBI agent, second, not as young as Cynthia, but second youngest. But his focus definitely is on investigation. He has the ability not only to manipulate energy, but to create energy fields. But that's not what he uses. He focuses more on his mind. So he's more about his investigative skills. He actually is a little bit shy about using his powers, and he had a traumatic experience at a younger age with discovering his powers. So, and I discuss that as well in the novel too. So as you read, you'll see why he's a little bit hesitant to use his powers. There are situations where he could use it, where he chooses not to because of certain fears. But as you read, you'll see why. All right. So we covered the inspirations. We covered a little bit about the backgrounds of the characters. And I'll talk a little bit about my writing process as well. And I'm sure a lot of the authors can kind of agree with me on certain aspects of it. And I know every writer's different. In the writing community, you have plotters and pantsers. I'm sure people have heard that term before. People who kind of plot things out ahead of time, and people who just kind of go by the pants of their seat. And there's some people who kind of do a little bit of both. I would say I'm more on the plotting side. And as you can see, there's a picture of my laptop as well as my legal pad that I do my handwritten outlines on. All right. So, in terms of the writing process, it usually starts with an inspiration, right? I talked about some of my inspirations for the novel. So, you get that inspiration, then you have to kind of come up with a cohesive storyline. And part of that, in terms of what I do, uh, given that my characters are more grounded in terms of, I think the previous author talked about sci-fi has usually likes to have a basis in reality, which is true. Mine is in that same vein. It has a more of a basis in reality, and almost like it's going on in today. So that includes some research. Now, I try my best to do as much research as I can when it comes to certain aspects of the military, certain aspects of technology, certain aspects of weaponry as well. So that takes a bulk of my time in the beginning process. Once I get the story, researching some of the technical details. And then next thing I usually like to do is I like to do some outlining. My first outline with the book was multiple pages. And it went through different iterations. But what it does, it helps me organize my thoughts and actually organize the storyline into something that makes sense before I sit down and actually start typing. And then that goes to my next point, which is the actual writing, sitting down and writing the prose of the book. Um, that part is a fun part too. Actually discovering the characters as you write, because you have the outline, which is more loose, whereas you when you write, you're a little bit more tight, more specific. And as I write, what I notice is that I get a little bit I get inspired a little bit, basing off of my outline as to, oh, well, let me do this, let me do that. Maybe I can add this in, maybe I can move things around here. Maybe something in the outline didn't quite jibe. Let's tweak it a little bit. So that part is fun. Um, so I definitely enjoy that part. It can be laborious. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure a lot of my fellow authors can attest to that, but it is fun. And then the next thing is the editing aspect. So that's also fun too, because what you typically do is you write, I typically like to write and then give it maybe a couple days break, then go back to it, go back and edit it. And then when I edit it, then I say, oh, well, let me see, let me get rid of this. Let me do this. Let me change this around. So I like that aspect too, because I feel like as I'm editing it, I'm actually discovering more as, sometimes even more than when I wrote it. So that's definitely an aspect. That part as well can be a little bit laborious, but it is fun because it helps to actually make the storyline better. Um, and you find plot holes when you're editing. You find things that could be added, things that, of course, can be shifted or cut out completely. As a matter of fact, when I wrote the first book, I had a lot of stuff. The storyline was really different, and especially towards the end aspect, towards the climax of the novel. And there's some things that I discovered from editing that really helped me to improve the writing. And then the last aspect is the rewriting part. So as I mentioned before, you have the writing and the editing. So the rewriting part is basically the part where you take some things out and you add some things in. And what I've done, actually, in the current novel, the second novel in the series that I'll talk about a little bit later, is I had to go back and rewrite some things based on my editing. There are some things that I noticed that could be improved, and some things that I felt like, okay, this needs to be changed around as well. So that aspect is fun too, because you get to improve your storyline. Because like most people know, most writers know, your first draft is not your best draft. It's just the beginning. And so when you go through that process of rewriting, then you revise it, refine it, and you make it better. So that's essentially how my process works. All right. So we talked about a number of things: storyline, the characters, and then also my writing inspiration. So what's next? So the book is a planned 7-book series featuring those the characters of Vigil. The sequel is titled Sovereign. It's coming out in late 2020. I currently have it out to beta readers right now with a plan to release it hopefully sometime in the last quarter of the year. Um, Hopefully everything will turn out well with that. But that storyline kind of continues what's going on in the first novel. And as a matter of fact, if you didn't read the first novel, you'd still be able to follow. But if you've read the first novel, it'll just further enrich the storyline as you read Sovereign. But it basically touches on aspects of artificial intelligence, how it impacts our world, how it impacts not just humans but superhumans. So I thought that would be a fun storyline to bring in there, and it also continues some of the other plot points that all the other characters were dealing with as well. All righty, so I've rambled on. Does anyone have any questions at all?
We have a question from James. He says, I do the same with writing, editing, and rewriting. How long does it take you to write the book in total?
Oh wow! So the first book, it took me a number of years. Like let's see, I wrote the 2002 is when I actually wrote it on a piece of paper. I didn't really seriously start, wrapping it up until 2014. So that's a 12-year gap. In there, of course, I was going to school and doing other things, so that kind of slowed me down. But then between 2014 and 2019, I still had to go back and revise some things and change things around and actually formalize it. So it took me like 16 years. But the second book, hopefully, then of course I'm a newbie writer, so that's why it took so long going back and forth. But on my current book, the second book in the series, I started April of 2019, so it's taken me a little bit over a year plus to write the second book. And I hope to get a little bit faster in terms of writing the books and editing them, being a little bit more diligent about that. I think as I've got progressed as a writer, I'm trying to be a little bit more disciplined about getting through things.
Great. Any other questions? Comments? Marilyn says, I really enjoyed your presentation. If you need more beta testers for the other 6 books, she raises her hand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sure. And I have a slide, and I'll actually on the next couple of slides, I'll talk about how you can reach out to me. So for sure, I would definitely welcome you as my beta reader. I appreciate it.
And you got a compliment that you did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
We'll move on to that slide about your giveaway.
Giveaways, yes. So thank you so much, Josette. So giveaway. So the first 5 people who contact me with the subject line "Slover Local Author Fair" can get a free electronic copy of Vigil. It's going to be in a PDF format. And my email is actually going to be in the following slide, but you can also go to my website, which is www.pbobeng.com, where you can download character cards. It has their stats, their information, the power sets, all those sorts of things too. So definitely check that out when you get a chance. And actually, you can go to the next slide too. All right, so yeah, so that's my email address. Sorry, under my website, my email address is pobeng@ascendancepublishing.com. So as I mentioned earlier, go ahead and email me at that email address with that subject line of Slower Local Library Fair, and I'll send you a copy of a PDF copy of the book. And again, you can connect with me on social media. Facebook, I'm at author PB Obeng, and also Instagram, I'm also at author_PB Obeng as well. So just type that in, and you'll be able to find me on social media.
Lynn says you have a great voice. You should read your own books.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate it.
All right, well, that wraps up our morning session. Oh, we have a question from Miko. What age rating is your book?
Oh, good question. So it's actually, if the child is 13 or up, you can read it. There's, I would say, more sci-fi action violence that's involved in there. Very minimal language. And I almost, if you can watch a PG-13 movie, you can read my book. I think that's probably the best way to align. It's nothing gross or anything like that, or explicit in my books. I try and keep it so that the younger kids who can understand some of the concepts can read it as well. So
Rashad asks, are there going to be cartoons or movies based on the books?
you know what? Hopefully a movie. God willing, Rashad, thank you again for participating. Yeah, hopefully a movie, but it remains to be seen. We'll see if I get some calls from Netflix or from Universal Studios or something like that. We'll see.
Hey, nothing wrong with that, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Marilyn wants to make sure that your email is spelled correctly on the current slide.
Yeah, it is. That's correct. It's Pobeng, POBENG at ascendancepublishing.com. Ascendance Publishing is all one word.
She says thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right. And last call, any other questions or comments?
Great. Josette, I just want to say thank you again for having me. And I appreciate the time too.
Oh, you're most welcome.